What's up everybody, Dr. Rossi, StrengthsAndSneakers.com. So in this video what I want to do is talk about the recent residency match because there's a lot of chatter after the match regarding the subspecialty of psychiatry and talking about psychiatry being, quote, the new dermatology. So I'll give you my thoughts on whether or not I think psychiatry is the new dermatology and what you can do to help potentially make your application a little more desirable if you're planning to be a part of the next upcoming match. Okay, so as soon as the match results came out this past week, and we saw that it was another good successful match, but one of the things that was really interesting that was commented on a lot from other psychiatrists and residency programs was how many of the positions went unfilled. So every year they discuss how many of these positions in psychiatry go unfilled. Well, this year there was only 3 positions, a total of 3, that were unfilled that would enter into the supplemental match to be filled most likely. So this was significant. That means we matched most of our positions. So naturally the question starts to become, well, is psychiatry becoming ultra competitive? Is it becoming like some of these other really competitive specialties? And I think while psychiatry is becoming more competitive than it used to be, because notoriously psychiatry was kind of seen as that specialty that you went into when you couldn't do anything else in medicine. So if you were a really bad medical student and you didn't really have any talent anywhere else, you could always go to psychiatry. This comment was actually made while I was in medical school. It basically said, like, make sure you get a psychiatry letter of recommendation because you know you could always use that as a fallback if you need to. Now, I don't agree with that advice. I don't think that's necessarily true at all. But there was always this perception that somehow, psychiatry was sort of a lesser medical specialty. It was a less important aspect. Mental health was a less important aspect of overall health than physical health, which luckily, thank God, we're starting to see a shift in people's mindset, starting to understand how valuable mental health really is, and that if we don't focus on our mental health, you really can't have any physical health without mental health being a component of that. So we're seeing a lot more respect, and I made a previous video where I talked about, being respected amongst colleagues in other specialties, and I think, what we do as psychiatrists and the type of work that we're doing is certainly work that's valuable and respected by your colleagues. But to answer the specific question, is psychiatry becoming more like dermatology? I think the basic answer is no, right? It's definitely doable to become a psychiatrist, even if you're not the top of your medical school class. There's definitely ways you can bolster your application and make yourself a more desirable candidate for the field of psychiatry. So I don't think you're running the same risk of not matching as you would if you were maybe not the best candidate for dermatology. And what I did was I looked at the 2020 statistics for, this is USMD seniors who went to psychiatry and those who went to dermatology. I don't believe the 2021 information is up just yet, but 2020 results we can take a look at to give us an idea as to whether or not, psychiatry, maybe I should rephrase that, how psychiatry compares to dermatology in terms of the standard things that most programs look at. So let's kind of go through it and just take a little look. One of the first things that we look at is the mean USMLE Step 1 score. So Step 1 scores are notoriously used to weed people out. What they will do is they will take most programs will set some kind of bar, and if you fall below whatever that average is that they're looking for in USMLE Step 1, they will not even look at your application. It just goes in the trash. Maybe a little bit of a nasty way of doing things, but they have to have some way to separate people, and this is one of the first cutoffs usually is how well you score on USMLE Step 1. That will be changing when USMLE Step 1 goes to pass-fail. So I don't think that's happened yet for this match group, but I think the next match group is going to be pass-fail USMLE Step 1, something like that. I'm not exactly sure when the pass-fail is going into play. But anyway, they're no longer going to be able to use your Step 1 score. So the mean USMLE Step 1 score for psychiatry was 227. Okay, not a bad score, a respectable score, but not an amazing score. Generally, I would say if you scored 240 or above, you scored pretty well, and if you got into the 250s or 260s, then you were doing really, really well. and that would have given you a good chance to get your foot at least in the door for most of these residencies. For dermatology, it was, of course, much higher. So the mean score was 248. So 227 to 248, significant difference in USMLE scores. Again, making it easier for someone who scores a little bit better in, say, psychiatry, someone who's in the 230s or say 240, they're going to have a really good shot at getting a look from most programs. Now, the mean USMLE Step 2 score for psychiatry was 241, which I thought was pretty respectable. That's not a bad score, and that's a little bit higher than I would have expected for psych, but generally people do much better on USMLE Step 2 because it's clinical and eliminates all that weird basic science stuff. But when you look at the mean score for dermatology, it's 256. So a little bit less of a gap there maybe, but it's still significant. It's still significant, and you still have to be that much better of a test taker just to get a look in derm. But some of the things I want to point out that I think really stand out to me in derm versus psychiatry is the number of research experiences, the number of abstracts, publications, and presentations. So this could be all fall under the category of scholarly activity. So if you add all that up for psychiatry, the number of research experiences is somewhere around 3.1, and the mean number of abstracts, presentations, publications is 5.6. So you really don't need that much, but that's still pretty significant. I mean, to be able to do almost 6 research projects on average for the average candidate, that's pretty impressive. But when you go and you look at dermatology, you see that the mean number of abstracts, presentations, and publications is 19. 19 pieces of scholarly activity, and that's the average, right? That's the mean. So this is very interesting, but kind of shows you that you need to be that much more competitive, and you need to be doing that much extra work outside of your regular medical school rotations and medical school requirements. So you got to be working that much harder to get into derm. So the other thing to note here is there's a lot fewer positions in derm. So they had 361 people matched compared to psychiatry, which had 1,029 people matched. I still think psychiatry needs more residency positions because we are at an absolute shortage of psychiatrists, and that's why I think partially why I think the specialty is taking off again. But I also think there's just a renewed interest in mental health in general. So there's a lot of significant differences, and another one to point out here is that those members of the Honor Society, AOA, it's only 6.8 for psychiatry, and it's 47.4, so almost half the people in derm are members of the Honor Society. So they were already high-achieving students, even before taking USMLE exams and such. With that said, that's pretty stark contrast. I don't think that psychiatry is anywhere near as competitive. So the next question becomes, what can you do to be more competitive as a psychiatric candidate for a position? One of the first things I'll say is obviously, control the things you can control. And the things you can control is like your study habits and work habits, and trying to score as well as you can on things like USMLE Step 1 and Step 2. As much as like those things don't, people say it doesn't matter that much, it does. It does, at least when you're trying to get your foot in the door. So trying to score well, get good grades, get good letters of recommendation would be my next thing to talk about. So good scores, good grades, and then obviously get some people that you train with, that you work with, potentially a program you might be interested in applying to. Get those program directors, get those department heads to write you, directors of psychiatry at a particular hospital, to write you those letters of recommendation. They are going to be so valuable when it comes to, as long as your application gets through the initial screening process. So once your application is through the initial screening process, things like letters of recommendation are really helpful. So try to really impress on your third-year clerkships. And that brings me to probably the next point here, which is make sure you do some audition rotations at some of the places you want to be, or you could see yourself being a resident. Audition rotations are very important, and there's a really important component of the audition rotation. You want to impress the attendings you're working with, and you want to have a really good showing to the attendings, but you also want to become friends and be liked by the residents. because I can tell you from my experience, in selecting candidates and looking at applications, the resident's opinion of a candidate can make or break your ability to come in to that residency. So if the residents don't like you, if the residents aren't vibing with you well, if they don't think you'd be a good fit for the program, that makes a huge difference. So try to make yourself an excellent fit for the program. Try to show why you would be a good candidate for that program, and become friends with those residents. Stay in touch with them. Get their phone numbers, email addresses. Every once in a while, drop them a text or an email, just updating them on what you're doing and reminding them that, hey, I'm really interested in being here. Remember me remember me when it comes to interview time, because I really want to be here, right? Doing those kind of things go a long way. And so the audition rotations, and while you're on the audition rotations, getting as many allies or people on your side as you can to help you to get to the program that you're interested in going to. So that would be the next thing. Research. People are always talking about research, and like we were saying, dermatology, you need at least 19 publications of some sort. Now, scholarly activity, what I found as a resident, I didn't do that much of it as a student, but as a resident, I've done quite a significant amount of scholarly activity. And what that really does is that encompasses a lot of different stuff, right? It's not just publications in peer-reviewed journals, which I would say are the hardest to do. They take the most time, they require the most effort, they require constant editing and changing and all this kind of stuff. So peer-reviewed journals are really tough. If you get one or two of those, excellent. Because as a medical student, that's going to be a huge advantage, especially if it's in a journal that's well respected within the field. So for instance, the Green Journal in Psychiatry, or even the Resident Green Journal in Psychiatry, would be a really good publication for a medical student trying to match to psychiatry. But again, it takes a lot of time. The thing that you really should focus on, in my opinion, is you should find residents who have interesting case reports or really kind of quick research projects that you can jump onto while you're rotating through there, and then submit those things to the national conferences. Now, I've maybe said this before, but I'll say it here. There's national, there's regional, and there's local conferences. You can obviously present at all of those, and you could present one piece of research at least two of those places. So if you have one poster, let's say you make, you could present it at the American Psychiatric Association national meeting, and you can also present it at, say, a local, regional, whatever New Jersey Psychiatric Association, let's say, regional meeting. So you could present it at two different places and use that same piece of research, and that gets you essentially, again, two experiences instead of just one. So that's a way to kind of leverage it. You should never present it at more than three places. I would recommend, if you do it at three places, you do it again really local, say a poster or research day at your hospital, regionally at, say, New Jersey Psychiatric Association, and then nationally at American Psychiatric Association meeting. So that would be a way of really leveraging a single piece of research that you did. Other things that fall into scholarly activities, if you do any type of presentation, say you do a talk or grand rounds, or you are asked to do a lecture or something like that as a medical student for the Department of Psychiatry, those things count as scholarly activity. Posters obviously count as scholarly activity. Research papers count as scholarly activity. And, anything that you can get like that, and you can kind of produce those things, that can really work in your favor. Another good one that comes up is sometimes they have these publications for narrative in medicine, where you talk about a patient that really impacted your life. That can be very, very powerful in psychiatry, because we really love working with people, and we really want to see that you're a people person and that you love your patients and that you really want to take care of your patients. That's another potential route that you could go. You could also look for publications and scholarly activity at things like, kevinmd.com, or, any of those type of blog sites that have a big following. If you get publications at those places, those also would be of interest to a program director, because it shows that you have a lot of initiative, that you have some maybe interesting opinion-based pieces about the field of psychiatry in general. So those are some of my tips for kind of boosting your application a little bit if you're applying psychiatry. I think it's still definitely possible. Obviously, network, get in with the residents and get in with the program directors and people at the locations and potential hospitals or programs that you want to match to. Make sure that you try to take advantage of those easy scholarly activities like poster presentations or presentations within the residency program that you're rotating through, or even simple things like opinion pieces or narrative in medicine. Make sure you do those things. That will help to enhance your chances of matching. Obviously, like I said at the beginning, you still got to score at a certain level. You still got to score, have certain grades. And you want to get those letters of recommendation from really, really good people, basically the highest level people within a department that you're working with. So you want either the director of psychiatry or the program director for the residency program that you're rotating through. Get those letters, make sure you impress and show out on the rotations, and don't forget to impress your residents because they're going to have a huge say in whether or not you match to that program. With that said, I don't think Psychiatry is the New Dermatology. It's definitely possible for you if you want it. So put the work in. Come be a psychiatrist. We'd love to have you. And if you like these videos and you want to see more, please like and subscribe to our channel so we can keep making this stuff.